In the movie A Nightmare on Elm Street, crazed villain Freddy Krueger takes out his victims with a glove made of claw-like weapons, tormenting them in their sleep and chasing them into real life. His skin burned and disfigured, covered only by the gloves, a fedora, and a green and red striped sweater. Well, turns out in San Antonio, Texas, back in 2016, a man dressed as the fictional killer appeared uninvited at a Halloween house party at about 5 a.m. Yep, this man was dressed as Freddy Krueger, and he and his friends were involved in an altercation. That was reported by the San Antonio Express News, and this escalated when people at the party tried to remove the uninvited guests. And that's when Freddy Krueger pulled a weapon from his costume and started firing, according to the San Antonio police. 4 men and 1 woman were hit, and according to one witness, it woke them up in the middle of the night. They heard a bunch of yelling and screaming and hollering. Next thing they knew, they heard a couple of, explosives, and then 4 of the 5 pops after that, and then they could see the flashes and everything. So at least 3 male victims were transported to University Hospital and treated. A 4th male victim was treated at Baptist Medical Center, and sadly the female victim drove herself to the hospital but crashed on the way. Police said there was a pushing match between the 3 suspects and the man and his friends, all before we have the name of the bad guy, Robert Contreras, allegedly fired at the man in the abdomen and ran off. Now, there were no breaks in the case until the host of the party reportedly identified Contreras in a photo lineup. But here's the thing, we don't know how the police developed him as a suspect. We genuinely have no idea how they found him, but there was a second witness who identified him as well, so I guess, alright. A judge sent a warrant for the arrest on August 9th of 2017, and it was finally carried out almost 1 year to the day after the event. Soon after, the SAPD obtained a search warrant for his car, and they found weapons, ammunition, and some fun substances inside. Jeepers. On Halloween night in 1963, during a holiday on ice skating exhibition at the Indiana State Fairgrounds Coliseum, a propane gas explosion killed 74 people and injured nearly 400. It was just after 11 p.m. With only 3 minutes remaining in the opening night show, the skaters were finishing a medley called Mardi Gras. Nobody realized that propane gas was leaking from a rusty tank in the concession area, slowly filling the unventilated room. As the skaters began gliding into a pinwheel formation for the finale, the gas came in contact with an electric popcorn machine. When the gas ignited, a blast of orange flame went up like 40 feet through the south side seats, catapulting people in chairs through the air. Concrete chunks and body parts sadly rained down. A lot of the spectators fell on the ice on the south side of the arena, while others fell into a crater caused by the explosion and were buried underneath huge slabs of concrete. 54 people passed away on the scene, and another 20 later passed of their injuries. Indianapolis news reporter Bill Roberts was attending the show with his wife and was able to describe the scene in graphic detail, because for a couple of seconds, nobody cried out. Then there were screams and cries of agony, and the audience jumped from their seats as if in unison and started rushing for the exits, but the orchestra continued to play. His wife was drawn to a blonde with her mother. The blonde's coat was soaked in redness. They were looking for the father. Outside the main entrance, a man was sitting with a huge, lump by his left eye. It had already bruised up quite terribly. Part of the calf of his left leg was gone. The reporter reported the events as he saw them. He said it was like walking into a nightmare. It was the worst thing that he had seen since being in combat in a major world event. The lights above were still casting a bluish light onto an ice show. There was a red satin slipper on the ice, and 3 feet away was a pool of human redness. A gray-haired man lying on his back was staring lifelessly at the ceiling. Ambulance attendants threw a gray blanket across him. Chairs were scattered like, pins on the south end of the big building. The fairgrounds itself was almost like a battleground. The surrounding streets thick with police, and the edges of the streets jammed with crowds, slowing the movement of ambulances, fire engines, just because everybody wanted answers. Rescuers used the nearby cattle barn as a temporary hospital. The coroner's office set up a temporary morgue on the ice floor. Folks who had passed away were placed on plywood and lined up on the ice according to gender and age. Family members who came to identify loved ones had to register at the administration building before being led to the Coliseum. At the time, every hospital in Indianapolis and surrounding counties took in the wounded. Medical and nursing students were utilized. 20 women sat in the basement room of the Red Cross chapter house, answering as many phones as they could get their hands on. They spent hours upon hours telling callers where the injured were, verifying fatalities, accepting offers of aid and donations of important things. One volunteer delivered the news to Marine Corporal Melvin Dubner on duty in Vietnam, because sadly his mother had passed away in the explosion. A Marion County grand jury indicted the state fire marshal, the Indianapolis fire chief, the general manager, and the concessions manager of the Coliseum, as well as officers of the company that supplied the gas. But there was only one conviction: the president of the gas supplier, and that verdict was later overturned by the Indiana Supreme Court. According to my sources, victims and survivors survivors ultimately received about $4.6 million in settlements. In 1991, the Coliseum acquired a sponsorship and was renamed to the Pepsi Coliseum, but that wasn't renewed in 2012, so it's now known as the Indiana Farmers Coliseum, and it underwent a $63 million renovation, so it should be safe to go to now. Okay folks, here's the most Halloween-y story I've got for you, just to end things on a lighter note, and it's got to do with spiders. Now if you're new here, I'm sorry, spiders and I are not a good combination, so if you see me shaking, I'm not cold, I don't do spiders. So wanting an authentic costume for a Halloween party, a young woman headed up to the attic of her home to look through a trunk of old clothes. A 1920s fringe dress caught her eye, and she's like, I gotta wear that, it's beautiful. She held it up in front of herself, she danced around the attic, she looked in a mirror, she's like, this is great, I know what I'm doing, it's perfect. But then she was looking in the mirror and she's like, oh no, my hair's long, it's all wrong. She needed like a bobbed hairdo from the 1920s. And like, I get it, I love attention to detail, obviously. But thankfully she was like, hey, you know what? I think I saw a wig at the bottom of the trunk. And she grabbed it, she was about to try it on, and the doorbell rang. So obviously, distraction. She grabbed the wig, she grabbed the dress, she ran downstairs to open the front door. Her best friend was like, hey, we're gonna be late to the party. I'll fix, the dress, I'll steam it, I love it. You go pin up your hair, we gotta go. Which like, been there, done that, you don't wanna be late to a party. Too late than fashionably late. So, once someone was dressed, she was thrilled. She like left with her bestie, they were giggling. She's like, oh, I look like a 1920 gangster's mall. If you need the context, that was the term used to describe the female companion of a male professional criminal. Mall also tends to be used as a euphemism for a lady of the night. But by the time the two were after the party, the woman was like scratching at the wig. She's like, okay, why is it itchy? Obviously, some wigs are itchy, especially if it's like a cheap wig or an old wig. If you're an arachnophobe, it's okay. We'll see you next video. Love you. So it got to the point where like, the girls had been at the party for like maybe 5-10 minutes and the scratching and the crawling was unbearable. So our girl's like, you know what, I gotta take this wig off. I don't think I can stand it all night. I looked cute, I'm over it. And her friend looked at her and was screaming because there was black spiders crawling out from under the wig. So obviously our girl is screaming as spiders are covering her face. She's panicking, she's slapping at them, she's like freaking out. She's grabbing the wig off her head, she's throwing it. There's a sea of baby spiders everywhere, they're scattering, everybody's screaming and running. I wanna scream and run right now. Turns out there was a spider that had spun a nest inside the wig, and then the little creepy crawlies hatched in time for the Halloween party. The poor woman ran from the party. She was actually awarded first place for creepiest Halloween Spider-Woman costume because like people thought it was actually realistic and she was just being, overly dramatic. No, she just genuinely had spiders in her wig. I've never found anything like that in a wig, just like a straight bobby pin, once a pine cone. Long story. Yeah, this actually happened, folks, and so check your wigs before you put them on.